Alright guys, welcome back to another tutorial, another drawing tutorial. This one we're going to focus on translucent shading and transparent shading. Translucent, transparent, it's pretty similar stuff. Transparent just means, I should probably have looked this up before I started this tutorial. Transparent means it's completely clear. Okay, my OCD kicked in, and I did look it up. Translucent means allowing light to pass through it diffusely. So a transparent object is going to be perfectly clear, and a translucent object is going to be partially clear. And basically, everything I've drawn here is a translucent object, except for this ball, which is supposed to be a solid object. As you can see, I did the standard shading on the ball. We have the highlight, then we have the gradient shadow to the deepest shadow, and then we have the reflective shadow, cast shadow, and I even threw a little bit of the reflective cast shadow just because I had mentioned it. I don't usually draw that in. Okay, the trick with transparent and translucent objects, as you can see, these are very simplistic. These are very simplistic examples because I want to show you the simplicity of it. I want to show you the basics of it. The best thing to do when you're dealing with transparent or translucent objects is to have the object or a picture of the object you want to draw in the location you want to draw it, because reflections are hard. Reflections are hard to figure out where they're going to come in, what part of the translucent object they're going to show up in. In this case, I put the reflection of the ball in the highlight. As you can see, they have the same basic shading. These are all translucent. Basically, they're diffuse. The light passing through them is diffuse. So this is our basic bottle from the first tutorial, except for it's shaded more properly. And as you can see, we have the highlight, we have the brightest source where the most photons hit it, and then we have a gradient shadow, which is less gradient, meaning that it's going to be lighter most of the way through, and it's going to get dark quicker to the deepest shadow. Now this is darker than I usually like to draw my bottles, but I wanted to make sure to emphasize the shadow. And then the reflective highlight is going to be much brighter because it's translucent. And as I showed on these two windows here, I just did two quick windows, and these are translucent windows. They're not transparent. Apparently they're a little fogged up, a little dirty or something. But I wanted to show that at an angle, when things are when a translucent object is at an angle, this is all depending on light source too, but at an angle, it is going to reflect more, and you'll be able to see through it less. And straight on, you'll be able to see through it more, and it will reflect less, seeing as the highlight is much smaller here, the highlight is much bigger here, and you got a reflection of the other window in it. Just a little small reflection in the highlight there. In this case, the bottle is at an angle to us at its edges, because remember, it's a three-dimensional object, so it's going to reflect more at the edges, and it's going to be more transparent in the middle. And that is why the line of the table in the background doesn't connect at the edges, because the bottle is thicker there. First of all, because you're seeing, remember, this is a three-dimensional object, so the bottle goes, that's the wall of the bottle right there. And if you had fluid in it, the fluid would not touch the outline. There would be a slight disconnection where the fluid is from the outline. Okay, and that will emphasize the thickness of the bottle. Now, I probably should have brought this highlight down farther. I personally think it should have gone down to, well, let's go ahead and add it in. Wow, that made a difference, didn't it? about there because, like I said, it's at the edge there, so it's going to reflect more at the edge at an angle, and you're going to be able to see through it more in the center where it's more face on to us. And as you can see, it warped the image of the table behind it, because as the photons pass through the bottle, from the light source, I got the arrow pointing out the light source. As the photons pass through the bottle, depending on the shape where they're at, they'll bend. When they hit that surface is going to bend them. In this case, it's striking mostly right at the curve. You see the angle of the light source is right at the curve, and that a convex curve like that is going to tend to focus light together, focus the photons together. So there in your cast shadow, you're actually going to have a highlight. And that's where the photons passing through the bottle are being focused into the shadow. Now, translucent objects are complicated because of the way they bend light. See, a lot of that light is bouncing off the surface and straight towards your eyes. It's hitting the edge of that surface and coming straight towards your eyes. But some of it is passing through and being warped and bending to the table there. And some of the light hitting the table behind is coming through the bottle to your eyes, and it's being warped, and that's why it warps the image of the table behind it. Now down below I did some water. Water is another wonderful translucent object that is complicated. I did a rock in the water at an angle, and like I said, at an angle, a translucent object is going to reflect more. So you see the nice reflection of the rock in the water. And I drew a couple ripples out. Ripples are going to be a change in shape. And so therefore they're going to not only disturb the reflection, but they're going to add a new highlight. Because they're an upraised portion. They're going to have a highlight and a shadow, and that's what the line represents as the shadow. And the highlight is represented by the fact that the shading of the water is interrupted. You see, it's white right on the outside of each of these ripples, and that's just where the light is striking it, because I used the same light source. I used the same light source coming in, so the outside of the ripple is raised up, and therefore light striking it is going to create a highlight right there. You're not gonna see it as much. It's going to be a much smaller highlight, but it is going to be there. And from above, just like with the window, you see through the water more. There's less reflection, and you see more through the water. You're still going to have the highlight at the ripple. Let's just go ahead and draw the arrow in here. But you see all the little pebbles under the water, and they're, of course, going to be blurry, and because the light underneath is bent, it's diffuse, which means, it's spread out, it's bent. It doesn't come through directly. A completely transparent object, of course, you'd see exactly what was behind it, but there are very few completely transparent things in existence. Even windows have fogginess, they have dirt on them, they have little warps in their surface. You'd think a window is flat, it looks flat, but if you could see the surface, even windows have little warps and curves in them, and that's what created the warped reflection in this window right here. So there are very few completely transparent objects, and if you had them, you would probably not notice they were there, except for the bright highlight, where actually if it's completely transparent, I'm not sure you'd see a highlight. And of course, with windows and with anything translucent, the lighting behind, of course, affects a lot. Like if this room behind this window were dark, you would see a lot more reflection. It would become much more like a mirror than it would, and you would see me sitting here at the computer with my goofy face drawing, instead of the room behind, which is what I drew, somewhat diffuse. And to get the diffuse look, I use the smudging. I use smudging. In this case, the blur tool in this program. But basically, if you can remember that at an angle, things are going to, translucent object is going to reflect more, and you'll be able to see through it less. Like, you may be able to see a little bit of this rock as it continues under the water from here, over top of that reflection, but you won't see much of it. It would be very blurred, and it would be, it would blend into the highlight a little bit more. And as you can see, I did a less dark outline on everything that was under the water, hidden under the water from the rock. But yeah, at an angle, this translucent object is going to reflect more, and there should be more of that ball reflected here, because I increased the highlight. And it's going to be warped by the surface. Obviously, if this were a smooth surface, it would show a perfect ball, but since it's a warped surface, it's going to show a warped ball. But that is the very basics. They're still going to have the basic shading, less of it. You want less of it on a translucent object, and the more transparent the translucent object is, the less shading you'll do. But they're still going to have a highlight, a gradient shadow, a deepest shadow, a reflective shadow, and a cast shadow. But remember, that cast shadow is likely to have, especially if it's a curved object like this, it is likely to have a focused highlight, a highlight of focused light that passed through it. So we're going to undo all these changes and just reopen this file. No, I don't want to open that. No, I don't want to open that. Open. No, I don't want to save changes. No. Let's reopen this folder back to its original state. And that's the very basics of it. You at an angle, translucent objects are going to reflect more, and at the face, they're going to be more transparent. You're going to be able to see through them more. They're still going to have the very basic shading that I taught in the shading tutorial: highlight, gradient shadow, darkest shadow, reflective shadow, cast shadow. And just don't forget, when you have a curved object like this, and also like water is going to, these highlights next to the ripples, or actually, if I drew more of the underwater surface here, you would actually see a highlight of those ripples. Let's just throw one in for fun, since the light is there. Let's say it's bent there. You're gonna have the highlight of these ripples actually cast on the surface of the water. And if the ripples were extreme, you might actually even have their reflections, reflected light from the water cast up on the rock. And as you notice on the rock here, you got a very strong reflective shadow. It's almost a reflective highlight more than a reflective shadow, because the surface is so mirrored and the light source is coming in and we're viewing it at this angle. See, from above, we're not seeing the reflection as much. So, and if you could see over here, you would see the highlight. If I had drawn more over that direction, you would see the highlight from the ripple right about here. Like if I drew in another rock, let's go ahead and draw in another rock just so we can, let's make it a big rock underwater. Just not quite enough to reach the surface. Draw it like a normal rock, just not quite as dark. Do your shading. And this looks really sketchy, but smudging fixes many mistakes. Okay. That's why I call it cheating, because it fixes so many mistakes. And there we go. We got our diffuse rock up under the water, and we'll see the highlight from that ripple there cast on it. Because this ripple, I didn't draw the depth line there because you don't want to complete the circle of the ripple, but you know it's there because it follows the circle around. But the highlight from that ripple, that line represents the shadow behind the ripple, and in front of it is a highlight, and that is the focused light, just like this is the focused light from the ripple. Now, the best thing to do, of course, is to draw a bunch of translucent objects that you can see and practice. You'll get the hang of it. I'm teaching you the basic rules here, not the overall rules, because these are very simplistic backgrounds. There's nothing else in the picture except this ball, you know, and the light source. So there's not much other reflections going on. Like if there was something over here, it would be showing up in the reflection at the edge, and you know, if there was something over here, it might be casting a light onto this, a reflective light onto this, and you may get a little slight foggy ghost image of it. That's why translucent and transparent objects are so complicated, because they can catch so many light sources and so many reflections. The best bet to do is to, well, first of all, trace your light source, trace your photons. You gotta remember where your light's hitting and follow where it's going to lead. Of course, you don't need to draw the guidelines to it, but you see, even some of this is reflecting up onto the top, and maybe we'll have a little bit of extra highlight under that ridge there that I didn't think about. You see, so following it in, you know, it would reflect up on the bottle top, and that would reflect back down, since it's such a strong light source. You gotta just trace your photons as they hit the object, and you know, and trace the photons as they hit objects around it. You know, light that's striking here, bouncing up onto the table. You know, light that's hitting the table behind and coming back through this. You got to think about all of these things with translucent objects, because they pick up light sources and reflections so easily. But right here is just the basic rules of thumb. These are the basic rules of thumb. At an angle, that is completely at an angle, and I'm just making it worse, aren't I? I could just point to this. But at an angle, things are going to reflect more. They're going to catch more light and bounce to you. And straight on, the light is going to pass. It's going to touch it and bounce off. And you're going to see the light from behind a lot more. Well, we'll go into water more. What the heck is that? Holy cow, I just opened up some new tool. I don't know what it'll... See, that's the problem when you hit buttons that you're not supposed to hit. I'm still getting used to this tablet, guys. Give me a break. But we're going to go into water in a tutorial on its own, because water, the movement of water and capturing the highlights and all, is complicated. So the water in this case is just an example of translucence and not a tutorial on water itself. I'm going to have a water tutorial of its own. I hope this was helpful, guys, and if it was, like and subscribe. Check out my other tutorials that were leading up to this, because pretty much everything I described here I went over in more detail in another tutorial. All the shading techniques I went over in another tutorial. And check out my book on Amazon.com. It's a great book. It's a psychological thriller. If you like books about crazy, this book is for you, because it is all about crazy. Thanks. See you next time.